Hi, and welcome back to Biology Leap Review. We are in Unit 3 right now. And so we just finished talking about homeostasis and how the different body systems function together in order to keep our body going and to keep our body in balance, because we have certain settings in our body that help keep us alive and keep us healthy, like a certain blood pressure level, a certain blood sugar level, a certain body temperature. And most of the time, our body is able to maintain that homeostasis without any problems. However, occasionally something happens and we get sick. And we're going to talk about that next, what things cause us to get sick. And when we get sick, our body systems have to really work hard to stay in balance. And so let's talk about those things that make us sick. So there's lots of different types of pathogens. There's parasitic worms, there's fungi, but the two that we're going to focus on are bacteria and viruses. So first, let's just talk a little bit about bacteria. Bacteria are unicellular microscopic organisms. That means that they're only made up of one cell, and you can't see them without the aid of a microscope. They're very tiny. They are prokaryotic, which means they have no nucleus or membrane-bound organelles like mitochondria and other types of organelles, chloroplast, those things. They don't have those. And so they come in different shapes. There's bacteria that are shaped like spheres, and those are called cocci. And then there are rod-shaped bacteria that are called bacilli. And then there are spiral-shaped bacteria, which are called spirochetes. So bacteria are really simple organisms. Like I said, they don't have a nucleus, but they still have DNA. And so their DNA is just loosely arranged out in the cytoplasm of the cell, not inside of a nucleus like ours is. And they have very few organelles, ribosomes to make proteins, of course, but that's just about it. They have little plasmids inside, which are like little vessels. But in order for a bacteria to reproduce, it's very simple. You don't have male bacteria and female bacteria. Bacteria reproduce asexually. And so that is basically a form of mitosis. It is called binary fission. And what happens is the bacteria gets bigger and makes a copy of its DNA, and then it just splits in half, just like in mitosis. And now you have, instead of just one, you have two bacteria. And that's how they reproduce, and they can do that very quickly. Every 20 minutes, some bacteria can reproduce themselves. Okay, and then there are viruses. Viruses are also microscopic. You cannot see them without an electron microscope. You can't see them with just a regular microscope because they're so very small. You have to have a very powerful microscope, and they are not a cell. They're not considered a living organism because they don't do things that living organisms do, like they don't have a metabolism. They don't do homeostasis. They can't reproduce on their own. They have to have a host to reproduce. So they're not considered living, like bacteria are considered living. Basically, they are made up, they do have DNA. So they're made up of DNA surrounded by a protein capsule. And they come in different shapes and varieties. Here's just a few. This one that looks like the COVID virus, but this is HIV, the influenza, the virus that causes the flu, rotavirus, which causes some stomach bugs, stomach illness, herpes. This one is called a bacteriophage because it's a virus that actually infects bacteria. So viruses can infect all types of living things, from humans to plants to bacteria and animals, of course. Okay, so viruses reproduce by one of two methods. The method over here on the left side with the red arrows is called the lytic cycle. Let's see if I can type that down here. Lytic cycle. And an example would be like a cold or flu. So both of those types of viruses go through this reproductive cycle you see over here on the left. And so what happens is the virus attaches itself to the host cell. So this might be a bacteria cell, or it might be a cell inside of our bodies. And basically what it does after it attaches, it injects its DNA into the host cell. And so the host cell is unaware that this is foreign DNA. So the host cell goes ahead and incorporates that DNA with its own DNA. And in the lytic cycle, it immediately starts making, it takes the DNA of the virus and immediately starts making more viruses. So a virus, that's what I mean by a virus can't reproduce on its own. A virus has to trick a host cell, like a cell in our body, into making more viruses. And so when our cells make more viruses, eventually those viruses bust out of the cell, killing the cell, and then going on to infect more cells. Okay, now the other type of reproductive cycle for viruses is called the lysogenic cycle. And an example of this would be HIV and herpes. Oops, let me go back. Okay, and so what happens in the lysogenic cycle is the same thing happens with the virus attaches itself to the host cell and injects its DNA. But instead of the host cell immediately making more copies of the virus, the viral DNA is simply incorporated into the host cell DNA. And then when the host cell makes a copy or does mitosis and begins to divide, it makes new cells that now have this viral DNA in it. So over time, as these cells continue to multiply, reproduce, make copies of this DNA, and you get more and more cells in the body that have this viral DNA incorporated into them. And that can go on for many, many years. And the person doesn't even know that they have the viral DNA inside of them. And so at some point, the lysogenic cycle will convert over into the lytic cycle. And scientists and doctors don't know what causes this, but something triggers these cells that have the viral DNA incorporated into them to switch over to the lytic cycle, and they begin making virus particles, and then those virus particles go into the lytic cycle and bust out of the cells and go and infect more cells. And then that makes the person extremely sick. So with these types of viruses, like the HIV and the herpes virus, a person can be infected with the viral DNA for years and years and years and not even know it. And then suddenly something will trigger those viruses, the viral DNA, to start making copies of viruses. Okay, so let's look at how bacteria and viruses are alike and how they are different. So bacteria reproduce by binary fission, which is basically mitosis. Viruses, and they do this on their own. No host cell required. Okay. Viruses, on the other hand, can only reproduce inside of a host cell. Okay. And of course, they both can reproduce and make more of themselves. Okay, as far as size goes, bacteria are larger, can be seen with a normal microscope. But viruses are smaller and can only be seen with a powerful electron microscope. They are both microscopic and cannot be seen by the human eye. Okay, bacteria are considered living, and that is because they have a metabolism. They do homeostasis and reproduce on their own. Whereas viruses are considered non-living because they have no metabolism. They do not make energy on their own. No, they do not maintain homeostasis. Therefore, they cannot live on their own. They can reproduce only inside a host cell. Okay. They have nothing in common in that area. One is truly living and the other one is non-living. Okay, impact on living things. They can be helpful or harmful. Helpful bacteria aid in digestion and produce nitrogen for plants in the soil. Harmful bacteria make us sick, causing fever, vomiting, etc. Viruses, on the other hand, are pretty much harmful. Only very few are helpful, and that is in the case when they are used by scientists to in genetic engineering. And this is, they use viruses sometimes to transfer DNA from one cell to another cell. and they're doing experiments with viruses to genetically engineer different types of plants and bacteria that may be helpful for humans in some capacity. As far as harmful, again, they make us sick, causing fever, vomiting, muscle cramps, etc. And bacteria can cause muscle cramps as well. So they can both be helpful. But most viruses are harmful. Okay, and then how are they treated? This is the main difference that is important to get in your mind, that will likely come up on the LEAP test, and that is bacteria can be eliminated with antibiotics in most cases. And the only exception is when the bacteria become antibiotic resistant. We're going to talk about that next in the next video. But with viruses, antibiotics do not work. The immune system must fight off the infection with the help of some viral meds. However, vaccines can prevent infection when taken prior to exposure to the virus. Okay. So very different ways that they are treated. Okay, so that is an overview of bacteria and viruses. In our next video, we will talk about, we'll go back and look more in depth at bacteria and how they reproduce, and how that can quickly get out of hand and make you very, very sick. And then after that, the next video after that, we'll talk about the impact of bacteria becoming resistant to antibiotics over time. Okay, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.